Speed has always held a fascination for man. The desire to beat the latest record has led to all kinds of technical progress, especially in aviation.
Contact. Contact. Contact.
In 1909, this Curtiss Pusher was the fastest aeroplane in the world. Glenn Curtiss had built and raced motorcycles in his craving for speed. He built the 60-horsepower Pusher to compete in the Gordon Bennett Trophy race at the world's first air show at Reims in France. Curtiss was the only American there, and he started as the underdog, arriving just in time to take part. The Gordon Bennett Trophy was by far the most coveted prize of the meet. Francis Louis Blériot was the favorite in his monoplane, fresh from his triumphant crossing of the English Channel. The spectators were treated to a thrilling race. The result was in the balance right up to the closing stages. Curtiss beat Blériot by 6 seconds, setting the first speed record for aeroplanes at 46.5 miles an hour. Dale Kreitz was 4 at the time, and at 83 still flies his Curtiss Pusher in the skies over Wisconsin.
You had all the apprehensions of what can happen, of course, when you're up there, whether this engine will keep on going. It could stop firing anytime, and then you are looking for a place to land. You work more flying a Curtiss Pusher in the 10 minutes than you flying all day in a normal airplane, because the airplane has no stability whatsoever, because the air currents are rising faster than the airplane moves forward. They always said they flew the darn things when the dew is on the grass in the morning and the mosquitoes are out at night. So that eliminated these thermals that give you a bump. All of a sudden you feel like you're in an elevator. You're just sitting there floating along in the air with nothing under you, and you just feel like you're accomplishing something out of this world. It's what Curtiss said at one time, I'd fly for the mere sport of it if I wasn't in the business, because there's a fascination about flying that's difficult to explain and hard to resist. And that's just about what flying is.
Many early aircraft had water-cooled engines, which were heavy and tended to overheat. French engineers hit on the idea of making the engine spin with the propeller, cooling itself in the process, and also reducing weight. The result was the rotary engine, which powered most record-breaking aircraft of the day, and many others, like the British Avro 504. Air racing had shown its value as a proving ground. And when Europe turned to war in 1914, rotary engines, based on the French design, powered a generation of fighters, like the Sopwith Pup. On the racing circuit, one event, more than any other, came to symbolize the quest for speed. It started at Monaco in 1913. Jacques Schneider, the French Undersecretary for Air, wanted to promote the design of seaplanes. He donated a magnificent trophy for which international teams would compete. After the war, the Schneider Cup became the most coveted prize in aviation. Italy won it in 1920, 21, and Britain in 1922. Then the Americans sent a team of Navy pilots who swept the ball, the winner reaching 181 miles an hour. The secret lay in their new Curtiss D-12 engines, which could be cooled by water even at very high power. In 1925, an American Army pilot, James Doolittle, won the trophy. Then the United States government withdrew financial support, leaving the Schneider Cup to the Europeans. The British came up with a new contender, the Supermarine S5, a new monoplane racer designed by R.J. Mitchell.
The wings were thinner and therefore had to be braced. And it was braced all over, almost like a bird cage. We apprentices, who reckoned we knew more than our bosses, looked at that and said, what are all those wires on it? We thought that was all wrong. And then I went to see it on Slipway, and I was highly impressed. It was this beautiful aeroplane, streamlined, slim. To me, the perfect aeroplane that existed.
The 1927 race was held in Venice between the Italians and the British. Both teams had new aircraft. The Italian M52s gradually dropped out with engine problems, leaving two S5s to romp home. Flight Lieutenant Webster won at 281 miles an hour. Webster returned to his hometown of Walsall to a hero's welcome. Once again, the search for more speed lay in more power. Rolls-Royce took up the challenge. Their R series of engines had many of the features of America's D-12, but they now produce nearly 2,000 horsepower.
These engines were really just made for the racing to start with. They found the engine worked fine for 20 minutes or half an hour. But of course that wasn't good enough. We wanted a bit more than that. And eventually they managed to produce at least an hour and a half absolute reliability.
The new S6 racers with the R engines were only just ready in 1929. If Britain could win 2 more races, it could keep the Schneider Cup forever. A national will developed to do so.
People came from all over the place. There were huge crowds on all the beaches, and it was a very exciting business. The amount of technology that went into those airplanes was tremendous. I mean, they really were touching on the sort of limits of aviation possibility.
Britain won the 1929 race. And in 1931, John Boothman ended the saga of the Schneider Cup by winning it outright. Then George Stainforth broke the world speed record at 407 miles an hour. With the end of the Schneider Cup, much of the competitiveness went out of air racing in Europe. But in America, the combination of high speeds and low flying was turned into a spectator sport, the National Air Races. They were a potent mixture of spectacle and danger for the crowd, and cash, glamour, and glittering prizes for the pilots. Today, the races are held at Reno, Nevada. Many of the aircraft are fighters dating from the Second World War, and racing them is expensive and a labor of love for the pilots. But winning remains the objective, and the setting is openly gladiatorial. While the crowds wait for the racing to start, the organizers entertain them with stunt flying and razzmatazz. The scene has barely changed in half a century. However daring the barnstormers, the main attraction was always the mass takeoff for closed-circuit races like the Thompson Trophy. The pilots were dedicated to the quest for speed, but they were a different breed from the military men of the Schneider. They were self-sufficient types, adventurers, garage mechanics and showmen operating on a shoestring. And one of them, Benny Howard, built his first aircraft to carry bootleg whiskey. And racing was not confined to men.
Congratulations, sweetheart. You set a new world record.
Well, thank you. It seems good to be down on the ground again. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Well, how'd it go, anyway?
Mary Hazlitt was one of the top racing pilots of her day.
I'm very glad to have been able to increase the women's speed record in my Riddell Williams racer from 210 miles an hour to a little over 255. And I hope that I'll live a long time to go farther and faster.
For women, there were the powder puff races.
I think the powder puff derby was a misnomer. There was certainly nothing powder puff about it. As a matter of fact, a girl was killed in the first one. We were a different breed. I won't say we were a better breed, but we were different. I suppose it required a certain amount of perhaps foolhardiness, disregard of one's own skin. I wouldn't call it courage. This was just something that I always wanted to do. I loved it, and I suppose I would be flying now, except there are very little demands for the services of an elderly lady test pilot.